Amazon has dominated B2C with this open marketplace model, creating a race to the bottom on price. Is that the model that's going to work everywhere? We're looking at B2B and B2C, and are there differences there in terms of what kind of marketplace models work? Let's find out.
So one of the topics we've been talking about kind of in the advisory business is the difference between an open versus a closed marketplace. And we're talking mostly product marketplaces. I guess this dynamic could kind of be somewhat relevant in service marketplaces, but not as much. Mostly more relevant in product marketplaces where you have products that could be sold by competing sellers, third-party sellers, or you have products that could be regarded as kind of a substitute that could come from multiple, say, more generic manufacturers, right? And kind of the idea of what are the main value props that attracts a customer, whether it's an individual consumer or a business customer. It's somewhat applicable to both customer types or customer segments. There's two generally main value props for marketplaces and specifically product marketplaces. One is kind of that convenience, that breadth and depth of a product catalog, right? Having kind of one place that you can go and buy all the stuff that you need for that given use case, right? And then the other one is around pricing. What you've seen historically over the past 20, 25 years now is pretty much all of the product marketplaces that have gotten a lot of scale, that are really big, particularly on the consumer side, would fit this open marketplace business model. Basically what that means, like an Amazon, a Walmart, StockX, basically what that means is all the third-party sellers that are posting inventory and posting a price for that inventory are essentially competing with each other. You as the buyer, basically going to buy the product from whoever is selling that product for the cheapest price. And that's where you really have this negative connotation that comes, particularly if you talk to suppliers and distributors. The negative connotation that comes from marketplace is this open marketplace kind of race to the bottom dynamic.
Yeah, I think there's nuance to when you talk about open versus closed. When you look at platforms, you could be open versus closed along a lot of different dimensions. So I think there's different ways to look at it. But I think particularly when you talk about product marketplaces, one of the main things that you're really talking about typically when people use this kind of terminology is price competition. Are you kind of openly sort of having everyone post prices and they're all competing directly against each other in this kind of open environment like an Amazon? Or is it more, there's kind of two ways to prevent that. One would be closed in the sense of only certain people can join and only certain people can be sellers. So you're not inviting competing sellers against each other, like a Target marketplace, for example. And the other way to do that is to have it be kind of, closed in the sense where there's not necessarily an open environment where all the prices are exposed and sort of this race to the bottom kind of dynamic happens. And there's different permutations of that, whether it's kind of giving sellers more access or control over how prices get published, or kind of different core transaction models that are less focused around sort of putting everyone on the same, listing page. Or, Shopify kind of has their quasi marketplace, for example, but they're not really trying to create like a central search experience for products. Everyone kind of has their own shop. So it's not easy to go and compare, a specific SKU across all the different sellers that might sell something that's the same or similar. But I think at the end of the day, it's really about, how open is this price competition? How difficult is it if you're a seller to not get caught in this kind of race to the bottom around price? And is that really the kind of core value prop?
Yeah, and I think where you see open marketplace be more appropriate than less appropriate, right? Closed marketplace, to your point, Nick, is more bespoke. It's more kind of providing still that convenience factor, one place that you can buy a bunch of products from multiple sellers, but maybe not infinite number of sellers. Giving you a lot of the tools to transact digitally, giving you a lot of the product data and ease of checkout and a common way to handle fulfillment and returns and policies and standards, right? All from the same kind of marketplace provider, but without kind of letting every seller just compete on price and driving that race to the bottom dynamic in the mind of really the customer. To me, where I see this closed marketplace versus open marketplace being more appropriate is another topic we talk about in the book, which is around kind of the level of commoditization in the marketplace. So What do I mean by that? Where you have products that are more standard, more straightforward, kind of more pack and shippable. The product is a product is a product. There isn't as much nuance in terms of, for example, what would be a more complicated product, something that is one part of a system, or there's many products that you need to kind of purchase that then fit together in order for that system to be installed properly, right? If you're thinking about home building or home construction or more complicated systems that you're going to put into your home, or things that are heavier on the fulfillment side that are more difficult or perishable, if we're talking about in the food space, for example, right? So the fulfillment isn't as easy or as straightforward that it would be if it's just kind of a standard thing, sits on the shelf, you pack and you ship it, and you kind of just need one of or a couple of that SKU or a couple different SKUs. Right? There's just not as complexity in the actual thing that you're buying, where, yeah, it's kind of just more commoditized. Like, I just need to buy this thing and I need to show up, and the faster it shows up and the better price I get, great. But when it's more complex, when there's more nuance to really making sure you're buying the right thing, or you want to make sure you're also buying the right quality of product, there's no counterfeits, there's no fakes, or it's a perishable product, or the fulfillment or delivery of that product is more articulate or nuanced, right? These are kinds of things where you say, you know what, there are things that beyond just getting the right price on the product, the total cost of ownership is actually more dynamic, right? If I don't get this product on time, or if I don't get all the right products together, kind of systematized in the right way, or there's a faulty component in this, right? Or where the nuance comes into it, where you're essentially saying, hey, I want to get the product, I want to get it at a fair price, but I also appreciate the service that comes from whoever this intermediary is that's helping to get the product to me in a timely fashion and with good quality control, et cetera, right? And you tend to see that a lot more in the B2B industries than in the B2C. You see it maybe a little bit in B2C, but you're seeing that a lot more in B2B distribution with larger kind of average order sizes, where you're catering to a business customers as opposed to an individual consumer. And that's probably why we're talking about this more, given the rise of B2B marketplaces. And
yeah, I think it's definitely a big phenomenon in B2B. And I think as you put it, kind of the total cost is a lot more, or the total risk and cost of something is a lot more necessarily than just the price you pay for it. So whether that's, expertise, value-added services, regulatory risk, if you're dealing with sort of hazardous things, or the transaction risk of a part failing, there's a lot of other types of value and cost to be created in B2B that isn't just the price of a widget. Whereas if you're buying, clothing or non-perishable food, like the kind of stuff Amazon typically sells, the thing is the thing. It's there's not much differentiation there other than this is the item I want and this is the cost of the item, and I'm going to get it, as fast and as cheap as I can get. But when you start to get into these more complex transactions that have a lot more transaction risk around them and a lot more complexity around them, then naturally there are other factors other than just price. And the Amazon kind of open marketplace model is really geared around, and they're pretty open about this, I guess no pun intended, getting the best price for the consumer is really what Amazon is focused on. But there are other ways to create marketplace models. And as you said, we've kind of seen this with these more closed models in B2B that solve for other primary challenges where price isn't the primary thing, the main factor that everyone's concerned about. Certainly one of them. You don't want to feel like you're getting ripped off or you're getting a bad deal, but it's not the only thing that you're solving for. Then that's where you see, other types of marketplace dynamics coming into play. I think the other thing you see in B2B is there might not be as much fragmentation in some parts of B2B as there is in B2C, for example. It's not the barriers to entry to become a seller for, chemicals, medical supplies, a lot of these, building materials is not quite as low as it is to say, for example, sell shoes on Amazon or whatever, pick your widget. So there's more barriers to entry. There's not quite as many sellers, and there's more concerns about quality versus just price. So there's a lot more at play, which means you need a different marketplace model. You can't just plug the Amazon model and everywhere and expect that to work.
Actually, in Amazon Business's own report, which they published last year, they did a study looking at what are the top 3 benefits for, again, business buyers who are buying digitally. First one here, 50% was access to a wider range of products. Second one, or basically tied for first, also 50%, is better prices. And then the third one's faster ordering. Those are the top 3 benefits of e-procurement for buyers. But when you look at, so these are the top 3 pain points of e-procurement. It's kind of, it's funny. 44% of people said online solutions have too many supply chain disruption and shipping delays, right? So that goes back to that value-added service, that fulfillment is actually going to get to me on time when I need it. 41% said it's too hard to get in touch with salespeople and company representatives. So, hey, I maybe need to ask a question because I'm not really sure like which one of these 5 things I need. And, I need to kind of figure this out now. Who could I talk to kind of just make sure I'm getting the right thing when you have these multiple SKUs that need to kind of be stitched together, which is very often for that business customer use case. And then 40% product information and descriptions are inadequate, which is interesting because generally you see these digital e-commerce players invest heavily in information and descriptions. So I was actually kind of surprised that one made the top 3 pain points. But basically, I think what this is getting at is, yeah, price is important, but it's not the be all end all. Maybe as much as it is in, as Jeff Bezos says, what is the one thing that I know absolutely is going to be true in 10 years? And that's that consumers want a cheaper price, right? That's kind of the thing. He's like, I don't really know what the future is, but I know that's always going to be true. I think, yeah, it's going to be true. People want stuff for cheaper. But again, what does the price actually mean? To your point, Nick, what's the total cost of ownership or total risk?
Right.
If you just go for the cheapest price on the widget. And that's where when you look into the world of B2B, it's a different price and kind of cost calculation, and that business buyers are very aware of. And I think that's why you haven't seen as dominant of Amazon Business is very dominant. They're making huge gains, right? So I'm not taking anything away from that, but we do have a more competitive mix in B2B than we did in B2C, say 20 years ago, when both industries were just getting going.
The other piece of this too, I'm surprised that those numbers in that Amazon survey are as high as they are, because the areas where Amazon has gone into in B2B are primarily the ones that look the most like Amazon on the B2C side. So a lot of office supplies, some kind of industrial parts and food items, Jansan kind of items. So like the kind of widget like items, that's where Amazon is really focused the most in B2B to start with, and where they've got the most traction. So if they're already hearing that when they're in those areas, then you can imagine that the numbers will actually be much higher as you start to get into these some more complex, more regulated, bigger item, things that don't fit the kind of Amazon model. As you look at other industries, chemicals, building materials, steel, and on and on. And those industries, if you probably did a survey there, the percentage that would identify those pain points would probably be even higher than what Amazon has found for the areas it's focused on today. One of the key messages here is there isn't a one-size-fits-all marketplace model. Just because we've seen Amazon do well with a certain model in B2C, that doesn't mean that's the model for every industry. That model fits with certain industry characteristics in the area that Amazon plays. There are other models even in B2C that have been successful and taken off. If you look at marketplaces like StockX have some nuances compared to how Amazon works. And then in B2B, there is a lot different. And we've seen a lot more diversity of types of marketplace models, open versus closed. I think around this price competition is a key access there where you see a lot of difference, but there are other ways as well. So just don't be expecting just because something worked in another industry, that's what's going to work in my industry. Whether you're a large enterprise, or a tech startup, you've really got to make a solution that fits the industry and solves the pain points of that industry. And it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all game. So if you like this video, go check out some of the recent videos we've done on how B2B distributors are investing in tech and this $8 trillion a year industry that is B2B distribution. Where is the money going and how are they embracing tech innovation? You also like videos we have about how distributors are embracing marketplace, as well as what Amazon Business is doing to try to dominate in B2B.